And then in 2018 was my year of unexpected things happening. So this is a kind of a timeline for what happened to me in 2018, starting with right at the very, and I know the dates very well for this time frame because I happened to first start showing symptoms of what would eventually be diagnosed as cancer on the first day of the fall semester. I woke up that morning, I started having all this abdominal pain, didn't know quite what it was, had to go start getting some tests and scans. And even at that point, I had about a month or so of real uncertainty about whether this was cancer that was causing my symptoms. Was it something benign that just happened to be causing it? And ended up having surgery on the 17th of September and went into surgery not knowing what the diagnosis was going to be. Woke up from surgery, and that was actually one of the first questions I asked my parents in my very groggy post-surgery state was it cancer or not? And they were like, yes, it is. It's ovarian cancer, which for those of you who don't know anything about that, it is one of the most deadly of the cancers that women experience because they tend not to pick it up at an early time frame. It usually, the symptoms kind of get masked. I was very, very blessed that my cancer was actually diagnosed stage 1, which only happens about 15% of the time. So that was just starting to show one of the ways that God blessed me through this time was being able to find this tumor and this cancer very early on. I started chemo just a few weeks later and had a number of rounds of that. And that was a very long and very hard process, lots of side effects that I experienced, but I'll talk a little bit about that because some of those really helped me to grow and learn how to deal with challenge. So that's a little bit of my kind of time frame for how all this started. So let me talk a little bit about what are some of these key things. You know, we had it in the title, faith and community and psychology. Those three things really combined to help me cope with what became a very, distressing, a very challenging, a very kind of dark period in my life. So I'm going to start with community. And people who know me know that I like to make references to pop culture. So some of you will probably recognize what I'm trying to reference. But one of the things that I want to focus on is the importance of social support, the importance of having people around you who are going to be there for you when you are going through something that is, life-threatening, going through something that is very dark, you're going through something that's very challenging, very stressful, very difficult. And I was thinking, before surgery and right after surgery, I was in my hospital room and I was, finally got my cell phone back when I was kind of awake enough to use it. I'm really still not sure my parents should have given the cell phone back to me because I was kind of, instead of drunk texting or drunk dialing people, I was like, high on the anesthesia and all of these meds. But there were a few people that I knew were going to be the first on my list to just talk about, share what was going on. And these are some of the people I'm highlighting on this slide. My friend Lauren, who's down in the lower corner. And she's been one of my best friends since kindergarten. She was one of the first people that I called and said, hey, unfortunately the news isn't good, it's cancer. And my other two friends, actually that's a picture of them. They came to visit me when I was going through chemo to help give me that support. My friend Kayla, who's on the left-hand side of the screen, she's from Iowa. And then my friend Lachelle, who was at the time living in Texas, and they had come from all those faraway places to help support me. But those were the three friends of mine who I called first things first whenever I was in my room in the hospital to tell them this news and start getting support from them. So that you just need to have people in your life who you can rely on in those difficult times, friends who are going to, be part of the journey with you, not friends who are going to run away or say, I can't really deal with that. these three ladies in particular were ones I knew that no matter what time of day, it didn't matter what I needed, when I needed it, they were going to be there for me. And I really appreciated that. And that was one of the ways that I was able to cope with going through cancer, was having those people around me who I knew I could rely on in that very deep way. But it wasn't just, friends that I've known from my past. I had a whole community here at Erskine that really reached out to me when I was going through cancer. And, we talk about Erskine as being a family, and I really witnessed that in a very deep personal way when I was going through my treatment and my surgery. I mean, I can't, highlight every single person who reached out to me, but I'm going to try to give a number of examples from various parts of the Erskine community. I had administration reaching out. I had Dr. Gustafson and his wife Beth actually came to the hospital and visited with me. I know they were always checking in with me, praying for me, and I really appreciated that. I had tons of people on the faculty who I have up on the slide, various pictures of them. Individuals like Steve Sneitman, who is now a retired professor of psychology. He was one of my kind of go-tos for communication. He would kind of be my liaison, and he would share updates with people at the college so I wouldn't have to worry about those details. He would help take over psychology classes for me when I wasn't feeling up to it. I have people like Dr. Tiffany Hayden, who's in the bottom part of the screen, and she was somebody who helped to organize meals after I came back from my surgery. So for about 2 weeks, my parents didn't have to do any cooking. We had breakfasts and lunch and dinners delivered by faculty and staff and administration of Erskine. And she was kind of the spearhead organizing that. And on the right-hand side of the screen, I've got Christine, who's one of my really close friends. She teaches English here at Erskine. And she was one of the people that I could always rely on, who was close by, to be someone I knew would listen, someone that I could vent to about my frustrations and struggles and bounce ideas off of how to handle this. And again, I can't go and thank every single person or talk about every single person who helped me, but these are some of the people and in some of the ways in which Erskine really rallied around me and supported me. I had support from people that I knew really well, who I've spent a ton of time with as colleagues and friends. Then I had people I didn't know who were part of staff or the administration who would reach out and say, oh, here's a gift card to a grocery store so your parents don't have to spend money on groceries, or here's a gift card, you guys can go out and get a meal at a nice restaurant. And just, the way that I like to think about it, it was a way of God showing me his love in a very visible way that I think sometimes we forget. We can feel God's love, but actually kind of getting to see it in motion through these various people really reaching out and making sure that I had physical needs met, that I had, kind of mental and emotional and spiritual needs met. It was just this rallying around of the whole college community when I was going through a difficult time. And it's just something that I don't think I would have gotten at another place. The smallness of Erskine, the fact that we know each other so well, and we do value that community, it came into play, and it really showed up for me in particular when I was going through this difficult time. All these people reaching out and helping when I needed it most. You need to have good social support, people you can care, who care about you, who want to reach out and help you. We're not meant to do life alone. We're meant to do life with other people. And that's part of what's been really shown to me and demonstrated to me through my experience, is that we have to rely on one another when we're going through difficult times. Now, the psychologist in me has to talk a little bit about ways in which we kind of cope with stress psychologically. It's actually, coping with stress happens to be one of my areas of research. And so I really had to practice what I teach when I was going through a difficult time myself. And there's so many different ways that I was able to bring in what I knew from study and research into my own life. I'm just going to share and highlight a few of them because I don't have time to talk about all of them. But one of the things was to learn how to do good relaxation, to learn how to take care of myself, to learn how to de-stress and calm down. Because I just, when you're going through chemo and you're physically weak and you're mentally weak, you have to figure out ways not to add extra pressure onto yourself. And so I would do things like exercise. I wasn't really as big into exercise before going through this process, but I learned the value of doing something very simple, like walking around campus at night. I happen to live in Due West, and so one of the things I would do is I would go and I'd walk around and make laps around campus at night, and it was very therapeutic. It was very relaxing, just that picturesque atmosphere, being outside, but also being able to do exercise, which is really good for your mental and physical health. That was a valuable thing. But I also took time to do mental relaxation. I would try to find activities that I could do that were calming for me. It would be things like, doing crossword puzzles or word searches, doing things like I like to craft. And so I like to do things like make handmade cards. And so I would do some of that and find ways to, be able to focus my mind on something that wasn't the problem I was going through, that wasn't the work I had to do. And those were very beneficial ways to deal with my stress. But I also really had to learn through this process how to change my thinking. How could I see the positives in the midst of negatives? How could I, prevent myself from becoming someone who was, kind of a downer, who was, someone who just kind of got caught up in all of the negativity and let that kind of eat away at me? Because it can be very easy to do that when you're going through something difficult, to always focus on how everything is going wrong and going bad, and it's just, never going to get any better. And if we think like that, it spirals us downhill emotionally and mentally and physically. We just start feeling more worn down and more sad and more stressed. And so I had to make a lot of effort in changing the way I was perceiving the situation, viewing it and seeing the positives, the silver lining in the midst of a difficult situation. So things simple as saying, this is an experience that's going to grow me. I'm going to learn new things about myself through this experience. It's not all by not everything in my life is going wrong. I've got one part of my life, my physical health, that's not going that great, but I've got so many other good things going for me. Part of what I would do with this particular process was I would have a weekly time of writing a thankful list, where I would go through and I would write down every single thing that was going on currently that week that I was thankful for. It could be things as simple as, really good weather this week. But it could be answers to prayer requests. It could be kind words that someone had said to me, or things that someone had done for me. But I tried to make sure I took time to really focus on and highlight all the good things that were still going on in my life, even when I had this, kind of looming negative thing going on. I still had so many other things that outweighed that showed me that there was tons of good in the world and it wasn't just all bad. And it's not an easy thing to do. It takes effort to change that thinking. It's really easy to be negative. It tends to be a lot harder to be positive, but it was a worthwhile thing to find ways to focus on being optimistic, focus on being positive when I was going through a really difficult experience. Now, in terms of psychology, one of the other great things is you have to be able to laugh. Humor is an excellent way to deal with one's stress. This is a picture of me, one of the few pictures I took of me without any hair. And I have to say it was very interesting to go through that experience of losing your hair. It was obviously a little bit sad and disappointing and discouraging at first, but once I was through kind of the initial stress of losing it, I was able to kind of joke about it and use it as a way of having some humor in my life. I mentioned before that I'm a bit of a geek, a bit of a nerd. And so for me, I would start looking at and thinking about, oh man, who else in Hollywood? What are some of my favorite actors, actresses, people in movies who have beautiful bald heads just like I do? Patrick Stewart comes to mind, particularly because I really love Star Trek. But I was able to find the fun in it. I was also really, really hoping that chemo was going to give me superpowers. I mean, other people, like Captain America, have gotten superpowers from being injected with chemicals. Still waiting, still hasn't happened. But again, you've got to be able to laugh at the absurdity of life. You've got to be able to laugh at things when they do go wrong, because humor is just one of the most important ways of being able to lift your spirits and kind of, again, get you out of that negative thinking through being able to make fun of what's going on in your life. Now, faith was obviously another big part of my experience, and really relying on my faith as a way of helping me cope with cancer and all that I was going through. There are so many different ways that I used my faith, but these are three of them. Obviously, I spent a lot of time in prayer, a lot of time asking for things, a lot of time thanking for things, a lot of time also trying to make sure I wasn't just focused on myself. I was trying to focus on praying for other people as well. But spending time in prayer myself, knowing other people were praying for me, was such a great help and comfort. Whenever I was going through difficult times, if I was having a time where I was thinking, well, I'm not sure if chemo is going to work, or I'm just feeling really miserable today, going to God in prayer about what I was experiencing and being able to feel peace and comfort from Him through that time. I spent a lot of time listening to worship music and spending a lot of time singing worship songs. One of the things that I found out when you're doing chemo treatments was that you get to spend, for me, about 8 hours in a chair, in a room where there is no TV and there is no internet, because they're trying to make a very nice, calming space, but what they ended up making is a very boring space. And so I would bring my phone with me, I'd bring my iPod with me, and I would, as I was doing my chemo and I'm sitting there in the chair with all these IVs hooked up to me, I would listen to various worship songs. But I listened to these songs when I was going to treatment and coming back from treatment and going back and forth to appointments. I spent a lot of time in the car. I did my treatment in Greenville, so I had an hour drive from due west to Greenville quite frequently during those months of chemo. I spent a lot of time listening to worship music. I'll give some examples. I really have always been a huge fan of the Newsboys. Many songs that they have on their various records that I would listen to. There's one that's called A Million Pieces, which talks about being able to leave your cares and worries behind. There's a Lauren Daigle song called Look Up Child, and that one really spoke to me, this idea of making sure to turn your eyes towards God when you're struggling with things. Or Zach Williams, Fear is a Liar, was another very powerful song for me, talking about not letting that anxiety, not letting that fear get to me and kind of drown out the messages that God was trying to bring into my life. So lots, and again, those are just a few examples of many songs that I would kind of have on replay, and I'd listen to them again and again and get comfort from spending that time in worship. Well, I spent a lot of time in the Bible, a lot of time memorizing scripture. And what I would do is I would take various verses, I have an example, and I would put them on these note cards. So that way I could carry them with me. I could take them with me whenever I was going places, stick them in my purse. I could have them in my bedside table. I could, put them up places, display them. So that way I would be kind of constantly thinking about scripture, constantly having scripture on my heart. And there are, again, many, many verses that over those months in particular really spoke to me, but I'm going to highlight just a few. Philippians 4:13, I actually had this one on a t-shirt that says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me fighting ovarian cancer. But that was, again, a very powerful verse for me. Isaiah 43:2, which is what I actually just showed you on this card. When I pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. And when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned. The flame shall not consume you. And again, I felt like that's what I was going through. I was going through kind of all of this difficult stuff. I was going through the fire and the water, and just this sense of God was there with me on this journey together was just so powerful to me. In 2 Corinthians 12:19, this is the verse that says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And it was definitely something that spoke to me, because there were a lot of times where I felt very weak. I felt weak physically, I felt weak mentally. And this idea that God can use me even when I'm at my lowest was just so powerful to me and so uplifting to me. And then Romans 5:3-4, this one goes, not only that we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And again, this verse was speaking to me, helping to remind me that this difficult situation was growing me. It was growing my character in various ways, shapes, and forms that I may not even have recognized at the time, but I was going to be a different person, a better person after having gone through this experience. There are a lot of lessons that I learned through this. And again, it's hard to narrow down all the different things that cancer has taught me, but these are 3 of the big ones. Dealing with uncertainty. This one has really helped in the current situation with the pandemic. I've been really relying on what I've already learned to help me deal with the uncertainty that's been going on this past year. But I had to learn how to deal with it. There was so much that was unknown, so much that was anxiety provoking with cancer. Everything from, was it cancer or not? I spent about a month wondering that. Then after that, it was the question of, well, what stage is it? I didn't get the results back right away on the staging, so I had time thinking of, is this going to come back really advanced? Is it early? Then there were times of, is chemo going to work? Chemo doesn't always work. Did we get it all with surgery? Is it going to come back? And that's probably the one that I'm currently struggling the most with is, once you've been through cancer, you're always getting screened again to see if it's coming back. And I'm not going to be, have learned everything that I need to learn about all these lessons, but I'm still growing with all of these. But I had to learn to manage the anxiety, to be able to know that things are not under my control, that many things, most things, are not under my control. There's a lot of stuff that I can't predict how this is going to go. And being able to let go of the unknown, to embrace the unknown, to embrace the uncertainty, the ambiguity, has definitely been a hard lesson to learn, but a very valuable one. That we don't have control. We might think that we do, but we like to, have this kind of conception of control. But at the end of the day, we just don't. And we have to accept that there are things that happen to us in life that are unexpected, that come out of the blue, and to know that that doesn't mean it's going to break us, doesn't mean that it has to tear us down, but that we can, work through that situation to become better than who we were before. So anxiety and fear and uncertainty, the unknown doesn't scare me as much as it used to. Still have some. Whenever I have issues in terms of my blood work and it looks like, well, maybe the cancer's come back, that uncertainty rises again. But again, I have to have faith that God is in control, that He has a plan for my life that I'm not seeing, that He's got it. And I need to trust in Him, that I'm on a firm foundation, that even if I can't see what's in front of me, He does, and that gives me peace and comfort. Another big lesson that I've learned is letting go of perfectionism. I've always struggled with it. It's been one of the things that from an early age, I've always tried to do everything correctly in exactly the right way, no mistakes, no issues, nothing like that. And when you're going through something like chemo, you can't do things perfectly. There were so many side effects that I experienced with chemo. Some of the side effects were not the typical ones, actually. I ended up experiencing unusual side effects. Most people experience things like nausea. I actually didn't have any of that. I experienced severe pain with my chemo. So I would basically have muscle pain and joint pain, and I would have shooting pains all throughout my body. I would have, days after chemo where it was a struggle for me to even move because I was in so much pain. And when you're going through something like that, you can't be perfect because you can literally do nothing. I had to depend on my parents who were with me at the time. I had to depend on them to help me basically get out of bed some days, to make my meals for me, to take care of my house, all these things that I had been able to do independently and try to do my own way. I had to give that up because I couldn't be perfect when I was struggling so much physically. That also played into work. I was teaching while doing chemo, which was definitely a struggle. But I didn't want to stop. I needed to have, reasons for getting up and out of bed, and continuing to teach through treatment was one of them. But I pride myself on being able to deliver really good lectures that are on point, and I've got kind of all my ducks in a row, and everything's really great with how I present it, and my activities go smoothly and all of that. I couldn't do that with the chemo. I love to stand when I'm teaching and walk around the room. I had to sit most of the time because I couldn't be up and about because I couldn't move that well. I had to do things like wearing masks before that was trendy because I would have to worry about exposure to, flu and colds and things when my immune system was compromised. I also struggled with another side effect that they call chemo brain. And so I struggled with a lot of mental fog and confusion. In particular, I struggled with what they call word finding, where during my treatment, chemos, that's lovely toxic chemicals going all throughout your body. And it was impacting my brain's ability to function correctly. And I would struggle with finding the words for what I wanted to say, which as a professor, that is so disheartening because my job is to talk. My job is to convey information. And I would have times where a subject that I have taught for years that I know really well, and I can't think of the term. I can't think of what to say next. And it really was a very humbling experience. It really taught me that, yeah, you can't be perfect. There is no perfection going on. It's not attainable. So you have to let that goal go. It's not a healthy goal in the first place. And it really taught me the value of letting it go. Because I learned through this experience that guess what? I didn't have to be perfect. My work still got done. My students still learned psychology. I was still able to do my committee work and other stuff that I was doing. It didn't prevent me from being able to take care of my responsibilities. It didn't, impact my ability to continue to kind of live my life and do fun things. Again, I had to make changes and adjustments, but the world didn't fall apart. I didn't suddenly become a horrible professor and my, responsibilities all went out the window. I was still able to do everything I needed to do. And it was kind of interesting is that during this time of not feeling like a really great professor, I ended up being awarded an Excellence in Teaching Award that particular year. So again, I realized that you don't have to be perfect to be able to do your job and to be able to live your life. And so I've been, I still struggle with it, but it's a lot less powerful of a struggle than what it used to be. Another of the lessons that I've learned is about God's love, which I think for a lot of people is kind of counterintuitive. You think, oh man, you're going through cancer. How could you think that God loves you or even cares about you? Kind of the why would he let that happen question. And I understand those perspectives and those thoughts, but God really showed up in so many amazing ways through this process that I knew he was there for me. It was through the community that I mentioned earlier, all of these people, these friends, the people at Erskine who just rallied around me and supported me in ways that I never expected to happen. It came through the fact that my parents happened to have moved in with me, which is, I know, not the way it typically goes, but by about a month before my diagnosis, or before I started having symptoms that August, my dad had gotten a job at Clemson, and my parents were wanting to spend some time finding a house, and so they decided that, hey, you can just move in with me for a little bit. And so I actually already had my family right in the same house with me at the exact time I needed them to be there. If they hadn't been down here for my dad's job, they would have been in Pennsylvania, and that would have been so much harder to deal with logistically, and it would have been much more of a struggle to not have my family around. But again, God's timing. My dad had been searching for jobs actually in the academic world for a couple of years, and it just, again, that perfect God timing that he got this job in Clemson right at the time that I was going to need them to be with me in person, helping me go through this process. But there are, again, just so many other examples that throughout everything that was going on. Here's my cat. He's one of my other support systems. Say hi to everybody, Riker. I'm a cat person, so he doesn't like it when I don't have him. But, and in some ways, this is actually how God has shown his love to me too. I have a cat that is very affectionate, and he's a very good stress reliever. He makes sure to be around me and to purr and do all the wonderful, fun cat things whenever I need him to. But again, God showed his love visibly for all the people who came out to support me, who were there to be listening ears and, support for me mentally and emotionally as I was going through everything that I was dealing with. So instead of feeling like God had abandoned me, which I think a lot of people do when they go through difficult times, I really felt the opposite. I felt closer to God than I ever had in my life through just seeing all the ways that he was blessing me, all the ways that he was, having things turn out in my favor, like finding the cancer early, I actually happened to, before I was diagnosed, went to my PCP, and this particular doctor was like, I think you should go to Dr. Poles in Greenville. He's a really good doctor. So I went on this recommendation, and it happened to be that Dr. Poles is also a believer. He's also a Christian. And so God made sure that I had an oncologist who shared my faith, who would spend time doing things like praying with me when I would be going through hard times. During, we'd have to share things like, oh, you're going to lose your hair. It's cancer. It's, we're going to have to do chemo. All these things, he was able to spend time praying with me. And yeah, looking back, hindsight's 2020, looking back, I can just see all of these different ways that God intervened and, gave me all of these great blessings in my life. And so I feel his love for me very deeply through this entire process. Now, I'm happy to say that I am cancer-free as of February 2019, and have continued to be cancer-free since then. And, since going through cancer, there have been a lot of things that God has shown me that I can continue to do with this experience that I've had. Some of those experiences have involved reaching out and being part of the lives of other individuals who are going through similar experiences. So this actually most recent graduation, the graduation of the class of 2021. And these two young ladies, on the left is Nicole Biles, and on the right is Taylor Lawhone. And these two ladies are both students of mine, students I've had in classes. Taylor was a major in particular, and both are also cancer survivors. And so after I had already gone through my treatment, Nicole was diagnosed, and then Taylor was diagnosed. And since I knew both of them, it gave me an opportunity to really reach out to them, to say, hey, if you have questions, I know what it's like, ask me anything. I was able to, be there for them in a way that other people couldn't, because I'd been through the experience, so I could kind of mentor them and help them and encourage them as they were going through their experiences. And that's been kind of this new way that I've seen that, it wasn't just kind of personal growth for me that I experienced through cancer, but now I'm able to kind of pour into others and give back to others through my experience. Another way that I'm doing that is I'm part of the South Carolina Ovarian Cancer Foundation. Through this, I've not only gotten support from other ladies. We call ourselves Teal Sisters because teal is the color for ovarian cancer. It's been the theme color of the day. My shirt and my slides, I've tried to make it all teal colored. But, through this organization, not only have I got another level of social support, which is, again, crucial for helping us to go through difficult times and deal with stress, but it's given me another way to kind of share my story and my experience with others in a way that I feel can help people. I just know that, God took me through this experience not only to grow me in many ways and shapes and forms, but he's going to continue to use what I have gone through to then help others. And I've seen some of the ways that it's already working out. I'm excited to see some of the ways it's going to continue to work out this way in the future. I don't know all that God's going to continue to do through me, but I'm very excited about it. So there's a purpose behind what I went through, and I said I'm only beginning to see it. And sometimes people have asked me the question, if you could go back, would you go through it again? And I can honestly say that I would. It wasn't pleasant, it wasn't a fun experience, but I am such a better person for having gone through this experience that I wouldn't change it if I had the opportunity to do that. I would go through it again because I learned so much about myself and God and my faith and other people that it's just invaluable, all that I've gained through going through cancer. But I think one of the things that I'd like to kind of end with, and then I guess I always like leaving time for questions, people can ask them, but this was something that my pastor at my church had brought up, and I forget exactly when it came up, but it was just something that really stuck with me, is that I need to remember the ways in which God has been there for me in the past, to not forget when he has seen me through something that's difficult, like cancer in particular. And I need to remember what he does for me in the present, how he's currently walking through this journey of life with me, that he's currently helping me, and that I may not always see what's going on in the present, but I can know that he's there providing for me and of making a way for me, and that I can rely on the fact that he will continue to fulfill the promises that he has for the future, that he's going to continue to be there to comfort me, be there to bless me, be there to journey with me, to cry with me when I'm upset, and provide comfort to me when I'm hurting. And I think this is this kind of three-point little phrase is just very powerful. It's been very helpful to me going through chemo and going through cancer, is to remember what God has done for me, think about and focus on what he's currently doing for me, and then know that he's going to continue to do this for me in the future. So that's what I kind of have to share. And I'd love if people did have questions or things they'd want to ask. I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much. I learned so much. Do we have any questions for Dr. Van Scoy? Feel free to unmute your microphones or turn on your cameras.
I have a question. As someone, so my aunt actually had ovarian cancer as well, and she actually passed away from it. But I was wondering how I mean, I know you touched on it a little, but how was it? I'm trying to think of how to word it. How did you feel initially after you found out the results? Because I know it's like human instinct to kind of blame somebody when something bad happens. And I know since you talked a lot about your faith kind of being strengthened through this situation, how did you feel initially? Like, what was your first reaction, and how did you work through that?
Yeah. Actually, what was kind of interesting is I did a lot of working through it before the diagnosis. So during that kind of month where I had this entire uncertainty of we have no idea what's going on, this could be benign, it could be cancer, I spent a lot of time wrestling with, I was praying fervently for it not to be cancer. But at some point, I came to the point of surrender before the surgery, where I said, God, I may not get the answer that I want to this prayer. It may end up that this is cancer. And if that's your will, then I accept that. And so actually the news, my parents were like really surprised, because they were the ones that told me, and they were kind of freaked out that I didn't like start breaking down crying or get really angry, upset. I was just kind of like, okay, it's cancer. And it was because I'd already surrendered that to God beforehand, knowing that, I'm going to accept whatever this is. If it's benign, I'm going to be, thankful that it's not cancer. But if it is cancer, I know that you're going to lead me and guide me through it. So, I mean, it wasn't like I didn't have times where I wasn't obviously upset or things like that. But part of my initial reaction was actually, okay, this is how we're doing it. And kind of that kind of go-getter mentality of, I actually did really feel a lot of peace about it. But it took again, it was weeks of struggle leading up to that to get to that point. Yeah, that's a good question.
Any more questions?
Dr. Van Scoy, this is Dr. Harris. I've got a question for you. So, this went on for a long time, and I remember seeing you come to work, and we were all just amazed that you were you were doing the work and doing it, well, it seemed to us so well. And one question I have for you is, what advice would you give to people who are, witnessing a friend or colleague, a loved one going through this? What kind of support can they give, or any tips? Maybe you could reflect. Maybe I did this all wrong. I don't know. So maybe, but give us some advice on that.
There's probably lots of things I could go into, but I mean, I think one of the biggest things is just to be a good listener, and just to let that person share, kind of what they're going through, and just be someone who is empathic and loving and caring, and kind of, also be kind of that cheerleader, be that person who's, trying to kind of pick them up when they're feeling down. I think that's one of the things that you most need when you're going through something like this, is just people listening, just letting you vent and kind of share about, how crummy you feel. And they're like, oh yeah, just to be that support system, but also to be, to figure out ways for that person. Because again, everyone's a little bit different, in terms of, do they need kind of words of encouragement? Do they need someone who's there for them to do activities with them? Do they need someone to just send them a little care package, right? Everyone's kind of they need a hug, figure out kind of what that person's kind of love language is, and try to really feed into them that way, to give them that positivity that they need in their life. I find out that I really tend to be a gift love language person. And the students actually were another group that in the whole Erskine community that really reached out to me. And so many of them, I'm not sure if any of them are on tonight, who were around when I was going through cancer and things like that, but they know how much I love Batman. They made me this giant handmade, I'm talking like large and in charge Batman card, where everybody in the department signed little messages. They also helped, some of them helped volunteer in terms of bringing meals. They also made this huge, they called it the Netflix, binge watching care package, that they just threw popcorn and candy, and I think they had lotion and comfy fuzzy socks. And so, they also found a way to then, let me know that they cared. And that was it was really comforting to know that they wanted to take that time, energy, and effort to say, we care about you. Here's something to make you feel better. That's a good question as well, John.
Do we have any more questions? I always hesitate. I never know if someone's going to jump in. All right, well, it looks like we don't have any more questions, but thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dr. Van Scoy, and thank you all for just sharing your story with us. We truly appreciate it. We do have more We Are Erskine events coming up this fall, so make sure you guys check your social media, check the Erskine website, and your emails. We'll be sending out more information as those come available. I hope you all have a wonderful night, and thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Bye.